Yes.
Not really.
Yes.
I couldn't finish it. I mean, I did go to some point, but not entirely, unfortunately.
Okay, what I'd like to start out with is a discussion about the movie, and I'd like to hear from you as much as possible on what can we learn from the movie about principles of accomplishment. It's an open discussion.
Well, first of all, thanks for that chance. I was so sorry that I haven't watched that movie before, and like I was asking myself why haven't I watched it before. It's really a great movie, like a life lesson.
It is. It is a good. And I've seen it many times, and each time it's still offers good lessons.
Or more like new and new lessons, right? The more you watch, more lessons you can draw from it.
So, anyone, let's just start and have a discussion for some.
I can start about accomplishment. I think that, and according to this movie, my thought is that if someone wants to reach any kind of goal in sport, in personal life, in work, anyway, everyone needs to find strengths in themselves to reach this goal. Everyone needs this strength, energy, and want. Others around us maybe can help us, persuade us, motivate us, but any goal we want to accomplish is the only way we should do, and only we can do this without any help of others. This help from others may be motivation, support, but this is the way we should go alone till the goal.
Okay, so definitely it's about accomplishment. That was clear.
And also I would add that all of us have the authentic shot, but we have to find it.
How do you find it?
Maybe listening deeply like to yourself, like that guy, the caddy, this Will Smith's character who appeared there.
Bagger.
It was, Bagger Vance. Yeah, it was sort of the voice of the heart, your intuition, to which you need to listen. Sometimes we just over-listen it and ignore it. We're that amused or stressed or pretending not to find time for it.
Anyone got?
I want to add about this. There was one key point in this movie that Juno find the point where he was in harmony with the universe, and this way he found his swing that he had lost.
Did you get any hints as to how he got in harmony with the universe, with the world?
With help of imagination, listening to his inner feelings, and also listening to universe. It's hard for me to explain why I'm thinking so, but I think he was actually listening also to universe and found the harmony with it.
I think with concentration and focus on it.
On what, Zizi?
On this harmony, on this point, this crossing point where this harmony is, and there is the one for everybody. You just need to be focused and concentrate on it to find that point of harmony.
Plus hard working and trying several times.
What else?
And also, I think that sometimes we need someone who believe in us before we believe in ourselves. And this was the point. I think Beggar helped to gain confidence, helped to Juno basically. And I think without Beggar, Juno was not be able to achieve this accomplishment. The Beggar believed that Juno was the great golfer, and he could and would able to compete with these two of champions. And also Beggar showed him to how to overcome adversities. Yeah, and Juno basically reinvented himself with how he played the golf and in overall, I think.
Can I add?
Yeah, please.
Me and Zizi were talking about this about 10 minutes ago before the lecture started, and we can understand this Beggar character in two ways. Like Georgi said, the person, we can see it, one way we can see it as if it's a different person who assists this Matt Damon character to win, but we can see it as if it's the inner self of Matt Damon character itself. There can be help from outside the world, from a very good person who believes in you. But even if you don't have anyone who believes in you, you can find it in yourself, this person. I think that this character of a little boy is very important in the movie as well, because this Matt Damon character sees how really genuinely he loves this game, and the moment the boy is talking about this game and telling that this is the only game where the gamer himself can give a penalty to himself, and at the end of the movie there's a moment where he begs him not to do that, and this character knows that this moment is more important than winning, because if he doesn't tell that the ball was moved, then for this boy, his mental things will change forever, and that was a very moving thing for me in the movie.
Why it was more important that, as you say, Hardy told him it's the only game where you can call a penalty on yourself, and
yes,
when Juna decided to call a penalty, Hardy begged him not to.
yes.
And Juna insisted. You rightly said it was a very important.
And that's the moment when Beggar leaves, because that's the moment he understands that he already is a winner.
Exactly.
Despite the fact, whether he puts the ball.
I think this was the moment when Juno was able to make his own decision without asking opinion to others, maybe little boy or Beggar. This was the moment when he was confident and he was ready to win and make own decisions without others' help. That's why Beggar left at that time.
He still asks Beggar to stay, like, what can I do without you? And Beggar says, no, you don't need me. You don't anymore need me. He's not still that confident, 100% confident, but Beggar urges him that he can like keep on going without beggar.
The real teacher doesn't make you dependent on him. He
Exactly.
Juna to trust himself. No?
Exactly. Then what's the point of teaching if a teacher stays for the whole life with the student?
Any other thoughts?
And overall, that this field is like the golf field is like the life itself, where you need to find your place, and you need to play the words that actually finishes the movie, the Hardy's words, when he's already an old guy. I'm playing, I keep on playing until I find my place there.
In the field, yeah. Mhm.
In the field, right.
So, what else? Srijit, Janani, Rani, anything that you add?
Subjective and objective elements that we discussed so far, like in Sully also, and in the decision-making matrix, I think we can look at this movie also. In this story, objectively, nothing really has changed much. Juna is what he was, but because the subjective elements change, there is a change in result. So I thought there was a parallel there.
This movie really highlights the fact that we've been trying to make throughout, that our subjective response to a situation is the real determinant. You illustrated it, I think, about the story of Bata. When everybody's giving up, Bata went and became the largest in the world. Chrysler, when everybody says it's an impossible situation. Steve Jobs, when Michael Dell advises him to cash in the company, and he takes it on to become the most valuable company in the history of the world. The difference in perception and attitude is all important. And that comes out in the story because after he shows his phenomenal talent in the second morning of the tournament, the third 18 holes, he suddenly loses it. He not only Bagger helps him get it on the second day, but then when he becomes overconfident, he loses it, which shows nothing has changed objectively. He has that capacity as a world-class player in him. Bagger, he couldn't find it himself. Bagger brought out that capacity in him, and then he lost it, and he had to find it again. What was that process of losing and finding?
As Zizi said, he was concentrated to improve his playing, but after reaching the maximum level, maybe in this play, he relaxed a little and lost this power.
So you think it was out of a lack of effort that he lost it?
Maybe he has less concentration about the high performance.
Anyone else?
Maybe that sort of path between when you believe yourself and you don't believe in yourself enough, and it's not enough. This sort of fluctuation that I think every human being has. Sometimes more, sometimes less.
What you've said, Gary, he became overconfident, and that's I agree with that. I can't add anything new. But then this process of finding himself again, finding his strength, it was due to what?
Maybe he was concerned about winning, and he was thinking too much to win this tournament.
What's the alternative, Georgie? That's very important. What's the alternative to be? We think
just he should just play and enjoy with this game. This is more
Yeah, if
important than winning or losing.
That's
yeah,
right.
you should enjoy the process. That is also very important in life, that you get everything. There's a fine line between the enjoying the process and being oriented on the success and winning. It doesn't mean that you don't want to win, but your only orientation shouldn't be winning. And that was very important in this case as well.
Exactly. That is, the emphasis should be on doing the best you can, not worrying about the result. As
When
long
you are worrying about the results and the winning, you are pressuring yourself, and you are unable to perform in your maximum level.
does that explain why he did so poorly the first day?
Maybe.
He
I'm
was,
sorry.
does that explain why he did so poorly in the first day? Fell 10 to 12 strokes behind. His mind was not really on the game. It was on the crowd and his humiliation and how he would disappoint everybody. And Adele even told him that he's totally humiliated.
Yeah, he was fighting with his demons.
He was fighting with himself. He wasn't really,
Exactly, yeah.
he was concentrating, but he was concentrating on himself, not on
It
the,
was full of fear. Maybe fear was the handicap, doing a bad job for him. Fear. He was full of fear to lose and to be humiliated, as you mentioned.
we call it self-consciousness. Everybody knows it in different things when you have your experience in public speaking or anything, or in athletics or in anything. When we're more conscious of the world that's watching us, what people think, rather than really fully involved in the act of doing, even when we know how. And we're not really identified with the work, we're identified with what people will think of us. Srijit, anything else you'd add?
Yeah, I think, there is an inner-outer correspondence happening in everyone's life, actually. We can see that when Bhagavan enters, that happens to the main hero there, actually. When we change our attitude or inner feelings and thoughts, I believe that, life also correspondingly reciprocate, Our thoughts, our attitudes, and our inner feelings have something to do with the real circumstances, is my understanding from the story, actually.
How do we get in tune with the field? That seems to be part of the key mystery to this whole thing. I know you've only had a chance to watch it once, and that's first time the story's engaging, and it's not easy to get everything. I didn't encourage you to watch it a couple of more times to see what, but anyone thought, how did he get in touch with the field?
First of all, a beggar and a little boy measured the length of field because beggar thought it was advantage for player to know the lengths and measures. And there was also one point that he was talking about grass in different time of day, because grass always turned to sun, and this was a very important point to think about, to think during the playing.
So Anna, at those times, he was really focused on the work and not focused on himself and the crowd of people all around him, no? When he was focused on the crowd, he couldn't perform. He lost his grip. He lost his swing. He held the club too tight. as they said, when he forgot everybody. In fact, if you remember the scene where Bagger finally asks him to concentrate on the field,
Yes.
when he, in that first time when he said, okay, what's the field? How do I do it? Everybody disappeared from him. He was surrounded by a crowd, but in the movie they showed everybody disappeared from his consciousness. It's only him, the field of the course, and the hole, the hole on the green at the other end. Everything else was blotted out.
Yeah, right. It was too much pressure on Juno that there was people disappointed. It was crowded. And when he eliminated this factor, he stayed alone with himself and managed to concentrate a lot on himself and on field too. Yeah, I remember this scene.
Have any of you heard of the book, the Bhagavad Gita?
I can't understand. Can you
Bhagavad
repeat?
Gita. Yes, yes.
You are what you believe, you become what you believe you can become.
Exactly. Actually, this movie was based on the teaching of the Gita. And in the Gita, Krishna, who was his teacher, who was a divine teacher, was known as Bhagavan. So Bagger Vance is a takeoff on Bhagavan. And the disciple who he taught, who was a very great warrior in ancient Egypt, his name was Arjuna. So Randolph Arjuna was the disciple. And he actually, in the movie, really tries to convey one of the essential, it's considered India's greatest spiritual text on a spiritual path in life. And one of the key things that the movie brings out is that to really be in touch with the field, to really be in touch with life and to accomplish at the maximum, you have to get out of the ego. You have to forget about what people are thinking about you or what you're thinking about yourself. You have to forget about whether you're going to succeed or fail and become one with the act and the work. And not worry about, as I think it was said earlier by Janani, this movie really shows the power of the subjective elements, which we've been seeing in The Miracle. We saw it in Sully, how important the subjective consciousness is in determining the results of anything we do. And we've seen it in companies as well. When I was watching the movie this time, I was thinking of Steve Jobs. Because Steve Jobs, when he decided he wanted to make a computer that really would serve people instead of people adjusting to the computer, when he came out with the first Macintosh, he wasn't thinking about what people will say. He didn't do a market survey. He didn't even care about what the board of directors said, because they all disagreed with him airing that movie. He was in touch with the field. If you remember, we went through a long discussion of the background of Steve Jobs and the evolution of American society at that time and the fears of the technology and the values of individuality of that generation. Steve Jobs really embodied that. He didn't even really worry about whether he makes money or not. He ended up making fabulous money, but the decisions he made were not based on this is a guaranteed way to make more money. He wasn't looking for the result. He was in touch with a real need in the society. For us, for business, the field is society. The field is the world we work in. And a company, we said a company is a child of the society. And a company that identifies itself with the society is in tune with the opportunities. A company that's only thinking, how do I make profit, is like Juna worrying about what everybody's going to say about me. And the difference is what we call the egoistic consciousness, when I'm only really thinking about myself, and the consciousnness in which I'm identified with the world in which I live, with the people with whom I live, and the work that I'm doing, and I become one with that. And I hadn't thought about Jobs so much with respect to this movie, but when I watched it the last time, it was so clear. He really was identified with the world, the society in which he lived. And he went and did Next, even though it failed the first time. He went and did things that nobody thought were possible. And yet he did them, just like Juna did what nobody could imagine was possible against the two greatest golfers in the world at that time, or of all time, they suggested up till then. And even after he had messed up totally on the first day, how he could come back in just 18 holes and even the score. It was incredible when he stopped thinking and worrying about what he was achieving and gave himself entirely to the work. This is a central message of the Gita, true, but not only that, but of high accomplishment. And I think one of you mentioned that the way Hardy kept summarizing, it's only a game. Life is only a game. You can only play it. The results depend on something else. And that's a key spiritual message of the Gita. Your job is to do your best, not to worry about the results. The more you worry about the results, the more you lose touch with the field, you lose touch with your own native capacities. You're out of harmony with the world in which you live because you stick yourself, the ego, in between. And that's it. So it's I think
harmony that you just mentioned. Jobs was in such harmony with society that even before people were fully conscious of what they wanted, he was able to tell. Every one of his products, it was copied by the competitors. They realized that there was a market only after he realized it, that harmony.
I would like to add, there is an interview in YouTube available. There is an interview in 1995 or 6 where one of the person criticizes and says there are so many defects in Apple products, and he was criticizing the technology, and Steve Jobs says, we don't sit together, look at the technology, what we have, and then we don't create a product to make money. We analyze what people want and then try to put together the technology to satisfy the needs of the people. So he asks them to give another chance. It's not only for Steve Jobs. There were so many good designers and lead engineers who would have got a better job elsewhere. But they all stayed with Apple. They wanted to create products. And that is beautifully showed where his real focus is. And we can also take Google as an example, because when they started, Sergey Brin and Page, they really wanted to create a better tool. They wanted to see, it was a college product for both of them. It was a project for them. And they thought by using the same principle that research papers are aligned, they could use the same principle and create a better tool. So when they wanted to make a nice product, they were successful. And this can be applied to us even if we are not going to start a new company with a large idea. This movie shows that the values that we have studied in previous classes, the value of truth, the value of humility, that will help us raise higher.
Mani, thank you. But why it was the truth? Why this point that came up about Juna calling a, what did you call it? He
penalty.
Huh?
The penalty for moving the ball.
Yeah, lost it. What was the significance of Juna calling the penalty on himself? Very important. we sensed it's important, and that's the point when Bagger left. The moment he saw Juna called the back, okay, that's enough. You don't need me anymore. Why?
Well, probably because of exactly what we've been talking about this whole time. So if he were still focused on winning, he wouldn't call a penalty upon himself. He would just let it go to score more points. But knowing that he was more invested in the game and playing it fair and the way it was supposed to play, that was the right way to do it. And that's why it was so important.
Exactly. That's exactly the point. And in the Gita, where it's a spiritual teaching, he says, your job, the job of every human being, is to do their best. The results are up to God. And do the right thing. The consequences and everything, the fruits of the work, is what they say, are not yours to decide. And you do the right thing for the right purpose, with the right intention, and give your best. That's all any human being can be asked. And yet that's so difficult for us. So difficult to forget what people will think. So difficult to really get engaged in doing it just rather than for what people will think of us or whether we'll succeed or fail or not. That's brought out beautifully in the story. So that's the point that Vani made, I think, about values. When you do something, and this is what I found in the research for Vital Difference, and gave a number of stories, and I give you one more today to illustrate it very dramatically, but the company like DuPont on safety, they didn't focus on safety because it would get them save money on their insurance and their downtime on the processes. They didn't do it, they did it because it's right in itself. And they found and proved that by doing what was good in itself for the right reason, it would also be a way, it would also help them be more successful. They didn't do it because they thought it would make them more successful. And the same thing with Sears, when Rosenwald said, money guaranteed, satisfaction guaranteed. He had no way of knowing 100 years ago how that would work out or how he said, it's right. We want trust. We want to be trustworthy. And they finally found out that because they really were trustworthy, that customers bought more and more from them than anybody else. Merck, we told the story a couple of weeks ago, when they decided that we are going to be the most credible company, pharmaceutical company, in giving the truth to our doctors. They must know, as if they're going to prescribe the drug to their own mother, what they would want them to know. It's good in itself, it's right in itself. And that turned out to be the lever that propelled them to #1 in the industry. They became the most admired corporation in America in any field. They couldn't have known that and didn't do it with that intention. They did, the intention was to do the very best they can. And that's brought out in the story. And when Juna does that, he actively thinks he's losing the match. He was actually in a position at that point to win the match, not tie it. And he said, winning the match is not important. What's important is that I do it the right way with the right spirit, and ended up in the tie as he did. Okay, well, I think we've got a lot out of this. You've got a lot out of the story. I encourage you to watch it again for your engagement and enjoyment. But I wanted you to see the story because it brings out a very central truth I've seen in business, it's in truth in life, but it really focuses on something that we often don't think about when we talk about business and organization, and that is the human decisions are really the determinant. And I think if you think back on all the stories, the real true stories that we've been going through in this course, you'll see that that element was there in different ways, different expressions with different people. But that element of getting the subjective right, doing it for the right reason in the right way, turns out to be an all-important determinative factor. Now, I'd like to go on with our limited time, and what I'm proposing is we're going to go a little bit further in one more dimension, which I mentioned last time, about looking at the act as the basic unit of accomplishment. And we're going to look at the act from the subjective dimension of what makes an act successful. The objective dimensions are, I think, fairly obvious. And after we finish that, that'll be about, well, the last part of this session will be a review of the whole course. You won't be, I hope, hearing anything new. Maybe I'll put it in a different way, and I'll try to tie everything together so you can see that all the subjects that we've been talking about in the previous 8 lectures fit into an overall framework, which I consider the theory of the organization. And I hope by seeing it together as one larger view, you'll understand the central principles that are there in everything. The same principles are there in everything that we've been discussing in the previous 8 lectures. So at any point, feel free to stop me for a question. And then the last 20 minutes or so, we're going to take any questions that you have about the course or about anything we've discussed today, but don't wait. Anything you hear that you're not clear about, stop me at any time. But we'll have an open session towards the end to take questions. And if you have a lot of questions, I don't mind going over for those of you who have the interest and patience to discuss further. I'd like to answer the questions. And then we'll end with a little more information about the final exam and how we propose it. And we'll answer any questions you have on that. Okay. So we talked last time that we started this course talking about society. And then we talked about the company as a child of the society that is born out of the society, its capacities and its needs. And then we came and talked a few lectures ago about the individual. It plays a critical role, not just the individual as Randolph Jr. or Steve Jobs or Bill Marriott, but every not just the individual as the leader, but every individual. And we said that the companies that are able to bring out the most of every individual in the company are the companies that grow the most, they're most successful, they grow, and they are able to sustain that success. And this movie illustrates what it means for one person to bring out the potential of one person and what difference it made in the movie. And then we came last time to the basis of all this, the microcosm of all this, the individual act. And my theme is the same elements that are there in the society and in the company, the whole list of objective factors, which we'll take a quick look at later again, and the whole list of subjective factors, they're there in every individual act as well. Like the act of Juna deciding to declare that he had moved the ball when he tried to remove the leaf. It was not just a physical act, it was a subjective act of decision and values that he was making. Like the decision that Sully had to make in 208 seconds to land on water. We saw it's a universe of facts, objective factors, and subjective factors. So now I'd like to just focus a little more on some of the ways you can energize. We talk about energizing a company.
Sir,
talked about it. Yes, Srijit?
Do we want to move the PPTs? You know, we are seeing the Bhagavans now.
I haven't been showing anything yet.
Oh, fine. Okay.
So this is it. You know, we're just going to start. As we've been talking about energizing the company, energizing the different engines of the company, we can talk about energizing the people in the company. We can also talk about energizing an act. And there are many ways. We could spend another 3-4 hours or maybe 9 lectures talking about ways to do it. I just wanted to mention a few of them, which are particularly powerful and I found particularly useful in business. And the first of them is the power of attention. This is really basic, but most managers may not realize that the most powerful thing we have is our attention. There's a company, there are a number of companies that have discovered the power and value of our attention. Can you think of one of them? Google. Why? Their whole business model is based on the fact we don't have to charge our customers. We give our customers something they want. They want information. In giving them information, we get their attention. And the attention of the customers, which is simply that they look at the pages to which they look. The attention of the customers makes Google a company worth so many hundreds of billions of dollars, one of the 5 most valuable companies in the world, without charging customers. Of course, they charge for certain things, but their whole business model is, we give you what you want and you give us your attention. Attention is really powerful. Attention is really valuable. Any of you ever heard of the story of Pygmalion? Famous play by George Bernard.
Yeah, George Bernard Shaw.
Yes, Zizi, that's right. And it's based on an old Greek myth.
Galathea.
And there's a modern American version of that story too. Zizi, you know what that is?
American version?
The Americanized version of it.
Which one?
It became a very, very famous Broadway play. I saw it. It was the only Broadway.
Yeah.
And then a very famous movie with
Movie with Katharine Hepburn playing in it.
Audrey Hepburn was.
Audrey. Katharine is different. Audrey Hepburn, right?
Exactly. My Fair Lady.
Yeah.
It's based on George Bernard Shaw's play Pygmalion. And the story is of a poor, uneducated girl selling flowers in London, and a professor of linguistics who has the belief that he can teach anyone how to speak perfect, excellent English. Not just grammatically correct English, he could teach anyone to speak English the way an aristocrat does, the way a member of the royal.
The Queen's English.
Literally, the Queen's or the King's English, that's right. And so he makes a kind of a wager with another friend of his, the Colonel, and they take this flower girl, also Eliza Doolittle, and they take her on an experiment for 6 months in which they raise her and perfect her English and her manners and her behavior and everything. And then finally, at the end of it, he takes her to a ball, a very famous aristocratic ball where there are members of the royalty from all over Europe. And he doesn't tell anybody who she is. He just said, this is Miss Eliza Doolittle. And one of the other linguistic experts in Europe, a Hungarian, comes and says, I have found out your secret. I know who this person is. She's a member of the Hungarian royal family. She's a princess. And this is the story that shows that with attention, with positive, energizing attention, you can bring out the princess, you can bring out the royalty, you can bring out the capacity, the latent capacities in anyone. Well, this idea of Pygmalion caught on with psychologists, because psychologists in the US about 40 years ago, they noticed 50 years ago that there's a truth in this. A group of psychologists went to a school in San Francisco, and they told the principal of the school that they had a test that could identify late bloomers. Now, a late bloomer was a young child who performed poorly in early age, but really had hidden capacity in it. And any educator would like to know which are the students who are really just dull students and which are the students who are performing way below capacity. Because if you know that, then you would try to do something to bring out their hidden talents. So the psychologist administered a test of all the students in the school. And then they went back and they threw all the examination papers in the basket. And they randomly assigned scores to the children and went back to the school and said, here's a list of your late bloomers. And they went away for a year. Of course, and they came back a year later and they saw and tested the students for their actual performance. And they found the students that had improved the most in the school during that year were the ones which the teachers believed were late bloomers. The students didn't know how they had been rated, but the teachers knew. So what does that say? The attention of the teacher is a key important factor in what is brought out from the students. And of course, that's what we see in the story of Bagger Vance. It's Bagger Vance brings out that potential which Juna doesn't believe is there and doesn't know how to bring out, even if he does believe. So that's the power of it.
Gary,
Yeah.
also I would like to add about Forrest Gump, something
Yes.
similar there, that his mother believed in him and helped him to make the best version of himself.
Wonderful. And he was limited in he was limited in intelligence, but not limited in courage and not limited in goodness and not in strength of character. He was a good man. That's a wonderful example. Really wonderful. It was his mother's affection and his mother's faith in him that enabled him to discover and bring out the very best he had in him. Thank you for that, Zizi. Great example. So I'm talking about energizing an act. This is also talking about energizing a person, but the same thing is there for an act. When you give an attention to an act, all the attention the act deserves, that's what Bagger was teaching Juna. Juna was getting up.
Gary, sorry to interrupt, but I remembered one moment when Bagger says Juno that he should give up because his play is bad and will be worse in future. And he persuades him to give up, but Juno is in states that he don't want to interrupt this play and want to go on and show better performance. This was one kind of tactic from Bagger.
Exactly, and what was his tactic? What was his idea? When he told Juno, why don't you just smack the ball into the water and you'll be so miserable that everybody will be happy if you quit and go home and nobody will miss you. And Juna says, I can't do that.
Yeah,
and
but he could.
And then
he could, but he did not want to give up.
Bagger says, I know you can't. I just wanted to be sure you know you can't. So he gave attention to that act and made it into an energizing act. And just by the smallest act, by dealing so carefully on just how Juna concentrated on the field rather than on himself, he energized the act. He even hit a hole in one. And so he was just getting Juna in touch with the field, the act, the game, himself, and the very thing he was doing. And that's the power to energize an act. So this is a general principle. It can be applied to anything. It can be applied to a human relationship. It can be applied to any work that we're doing. It can be applied to anybody we relate to. The power comes from our attention. We can energize anything positively, just like we can energize things negatively when we get angry or disappointed or have bad opinions about them. So it's a universal principle. This is another one, very basic principle, which sounds like something you would see in any economics or management textbook. But I'm talking about something a little different here when I talk about maximum utilization. I don't know if any of you are runners who have made really the athletics of running or swimming, really tried to be a competitive athlete. But there's a phenomenon that athletes know about, maybe some of you know from your own experience, you don't have to be professional or even competitive, called the second wind. Anyone ever heard of the second wind?
And also second breath, right?
Second?
They say breath.
What is the word?
Breath.
So someone help me.
She means second breath. She means to say that when you get tired, but then you actually continue doing. I think that's what she's
Exactly.
This is the same, yeah?
Same, Anna, you're absolutely right. That's exactly it. And what happens when you feel that you're absolutely exhausted and you can't breathe anymore and you can't go a further step, and suddenly there's an inflow of a new energy, new breathing, and you give a spurt of energy to go further. It's very well known in sports. Whatever name you call it, it doesn't matter. And this is actually a principle of maximum utilization. When we use anything to the maximum, not to 90% or 95%, and then we say, well, I've done my best. But when we exhaust our capacity on anything, at the point where we really exhaust it, the last 1%, life opens up new potentials and shows us things that we didn't know were there. It happened to Chrysler. They were down to their last dollars on daily expenses of 50 million. And there are companies that have made this a strategy, that they're not satisfied with doing well, they're not satisfied with doing better than others. They insist on taking it as close as they can to perfection. And I've been telling the story of at Federal Express, how when they were already 8 percentage points ahead of the rest of the overnight delivery, the courier companies, in terms of on-time delivery, Fred Smith said, it's not good enough. We've got to go for 100. We've got to go for that perfection. And that enabled them not just to keep improving, but to grow and become the global #1. Toyota did it with time, with their very famous just-in-time system of on time, not wasting a moment. Every moment must be done. So if you look at any act, we're talking about acts now, if you look at any act, if you can maximize the use of all of these resources, the act gets energized. Janani, can you add anything to that?
Bata, when he turned the company around, this was one of the things that he did. Maximum utilization of all that was there, plus elimination of waste. I think elimination of waste also goes along with this maximum utilization. That is one. And then another thing is any system, any act, it can be improved. Even a meeting can actually be made better. It can be a device, an instrument for increasing the level of communication and cooperation within a company. So each one can be improved. And then people are actually a nearly limitless reservoir of energy and talent, and there is no limit to how much more efficiently we can function. So in fact, this was what Chrysler did when he took over Chrysler. One of the things that he found was nobody was doing what he had been trained for. That was one thing that he noticed, and everybody was doing something else. And so even within this company, which was at that time, it had a deficit of $3.3 billion, Iacocca, he was able to see a reserve of dynamic, young, talented people who were not utilized, or who were underutilized, or who were being utilized for something that they were not trained for or hired for. When he changed that, when he gave these people the freedom and the responsibility to express their capacities in their work, he was able to transform Chrysler from a company that had a $3.3 billion deficit to one that made $3.3 billion of profit in just 2 years. So this utilization even of people, which is a limitless resource.
And we can go on. I think you get the idea.
Yes.
We're now working at the micro level of the individual act, not the macro level of the company and how to grow it or make it more profitable. The opportunities are there in every act. DuPont discovered it just in safety, doing as safely as possible. Marriott discovered it in getting those perfect standard operating procedures. Whichever area you look at, that potential is there. And this is the theory and the practice. We'll take one more point and then we'll break for a short time. Srijit.
Yes, sir. This is one of the most interesting managerial concept, rather a life concept I have recently came across with. We all know about what is meant by taking responsibilities. Responsibility of a duty, responsibility of our family or kids, responsibility towards our clients, or responsibility as a student or as a teacher, or responsibility towards our partner, so on and so forth. By consciousness responsibility, we mean by holding the responsibility for what that happens around us, as if we are the sole owner, author, authority, and actor involved. Best example we can see is in the movie Sully itself, where he had taken the complete responsibility of the passengers, crew, and his co-pilot in an extremely challenging situation of a water landing of his aircraft. As a pilot, he had certain official responsibilities to follow the procedures in contingencies, but in an extraordinary situation like a problem he faced in flying an aircraft, he had suddenly grown as a person, showcasing this phenomenon of consciousness responsibility. If we take the case of the famous leader, Nelson Mandela, he had taken the consciousness responsibility of dismantling the institutionalized racism against the blacks in South Africa. Same in case of Steve Jobs, where he had showcased the power of a passionate CEO in creating a series of products in the brand name of Apple, which caused a technical revolution in the world. Steve had taken the consciousness responsibility of the firm and that of his product and customers. And we are all familiar with the environmental problems, what our planet is facing. Can we take the consciousness responsibility of that? I had seen a lot of people back in India and around the world who had taken the total responsibility of this situation, acting, thinking, and living in such a way to save the world from global warming or pollution. Those works done by them are very, very personal to them. They are working as if it is their destiny. It's their responsibility to save the nature. That is what is called consciousness responsibilities. In one of the portions we had taken in the initial session, we had discussed about green revolution of India, where one agriculture scientist turned cabinet minister, Dr. C. Subramaniam, had taken the total responsibility of making India a self-sufficient state in agriculture and food production. He did that in just 5 years' time, where India had an acute food shortage in 1960s, and where we had a food supply only for 2 weeks. When we are exhausting ourselves with our subjective and objective capacities to foster the best results for everyone around us, that is when we are showcasing consciousness responsibility. And I would like to say those are the people who are showing or showcasing this consciousness responsibility are the real leaders of a new world.
So, thank you, Srijit. You're making a distinction between the normal sense of responsibility. We all know if I'm carrying on a job, I have responsibility for what's under my control. But what you're talking about is somebody who doesn't say I'm responsible for what's been given to me, what I have to do and what I've done or where I have the authority. You're talking about somebody who takes responsibility beyond what can be organizationally required of them. It's that attitude that imagine a company in which each employee feels responsible for the overall results, not just for their work. There are many companies where if I do my work well, then whatever happens to the company or whatever else others do. And that's really what we saw in The Miracle, where the players, instead of thinking about themselves as separate, they became so much a part of the team that each one of them felt like he should be responsible for the whole. I'm just going to give you one short example, and then we'll break for a few minutes. We went into a company which you may have read about in Vital Difference, Northwestern Mutual Life Insurance in Minneapolis, not one of the biggest life insurance companies in the US, but the best rated company with the best performance year after year, the most admired company in the industry. And I talked to one of their insurance marketing people, and he told me a fabulous story. The company had told him the thing that made this company really exceptional was they said, our job is not to make the most profit. Our job is to give the best possible service to those of our members who insure with us. Our commitment is to those people who we insure. And he told me about a case in which he handled, when a 40-year-old stockbroker developed a tumor in his brain, and he died 6 months later. And when his wife appealed to the insurance company for compensation for the life insurance, he had 2 children. The insurance company wrote back saying, I'm sorry, but your policy has expired. Your husband didn't pay the premiums for the last 6 months. The wife was she was already heartbroken. She lost her husband, but now it was total desperation. She'll lose the house and everything else because of this. Well, the marketing representative, the insurance agent assigned to her, said, let me look into this further. He took this attitude of consciousness responsibility. You're my client. My responsibility is to see that you get the best possible deal, that you get the best possible fairest treatment you can get. And he went back to the company and asked the company to please look into this further and take the same attitude. See, we have promised our insurees that we will take care of them. Isn't there anything we can do? And so the company put together a committee and they looked into the studied it further. And the committee came back with the recommendation. You see, actually, it's true he stopped paying his premiums 6 months earlier, but it's also possible or even likely that at that time he already had the beginnings of a tumor. And if he already had the beginnings of a tumor, he's not obliged. He's already a patient. He's not obliged to make further premium payments. The insurance comes in. And in fact, it could have changed his mental clarity so that he forgot and didn't even know that he hadn't paid the premiums. And the company came back, not just the agent, the company came back and said, we're paying the full value of the policy. So this was a company that took the attitude and wanted their employees to take the attitude. Your first responsibility is to our customer, not even to us, not the profitability of the company, but the benefit we owe to the customer. And this idea was so energizing to the representatives, because they really feel they have a missionary goal out there. When they go out to the customer, they can really tell the customer, I'm here to represent you. I work for you. I work for your benefit. And they mean it because the company's told them that's what they have to do. They've got to get the best for their customer. So it's a really dramatic example. It's not the CEO at the top. It's not the division head. It's not even the department manager. They've asked each of their employees to take that consciousness responsibility to do the very best they can for their customers. And that's given them the highest profit ratios, the greatest reputation, and the greatest loyalty of their policy owners, because they know this company really works for us. Okay, let's just take, and if you can oblige me on this, we won't have to keep you later, just 10 minutes for a break. And then we'll come back and go to the second part of today's program.
Okay.
Very successful companies, they were expecting to get somebody who was a tough, decisive leader, very leading out in front, like a Steve Jobs, for example. And what they found in most cases, but in almost all cases, that the leaders of these great corporations were actually very humble. Sundar Pichai being a great example of that. Always putting their people forth rather than putting themselves first, instead of this high profile and everything. So, and this of course is true not just at the level of the corporation, it's true at the level of the department, it's true at the level of, it's true at all levels. So we've just touched on some of the subjective elements that can be applied to energize a person, to energize a situation. The list is much longer, but I hope you get the idea. And just to tie this up with Bagger-Vance, it's interesting because when we use the word ego and we say he's really got an ego problem, what we usually mean is he's arrogant, self-centered, and self-important, and doesn't consider other people. But actually, we saw in Juna that his real ego problem was not that. His real ego problem was he had lost confidence in himself. It was not that he felt himself superior to everybody else, he felt himself inferior. And many people don't realize that whether you feel inferior or superior, you've still got the ego problem. The ego problem is when we're absorbed in ourselves and unable to think of other people because we're thinking of ourselves. Doesn't matter whether we're feeling sorry for ourselves or we're feeling proud of ourselves. And the movie does a good job because it shows both sides. It shows Juna failing when he thinks so badly of himself that he can't think of the work and the game. And again, at the other end, when he gets carried away with this sense of, now I don't need any advice from you, Bagger, I will just finish this off and win the tournament, he goes to the other extreme. So the movie really clearly says it's not one extreme or the other. It's not the humility of an inferiority complex. It's the capacity to forget yourself and do the work. Forget yourself and recognize other people. It's brought out beautifully. Okay. I am not going to go through this whole table with you, but I want you to see it and understand how it works. I think you'll recognize many of the themes here because we've talked about almost all of these things previously. The first column is a traditional way in which companies operate, organizations function. And I'm talking about energizing an act by shifting our consciousness attitude. And the second column showed what that shift would be, what it means when you shift from to, from maximizing profit to maximizing service. And there are so many good examples, from the company's benefit to the customer's benefit, from exercising authority to imparting to their employees the values of the company so they exercise authority over themselves. And again, we saw in the movie very well, Juna had internalized the value that of honesty. It was not Bagger or anyone else telling him he has to be honest here. It was him deciding because he decided it's an important value. So I think you see how to read the table, and that's really all I wanted to show you. There are the difference between the top performing companies or an energized company and the ordinary company is very often a shift in attitude, a difference in attitude on things like this. We've got a problem to overcome, or we've got an opportunity if we can figure out how to reconcile these things. If we can shift from competition to cooperation, not only among our employees or with our customers, but even with our competitors as well. And I just gave the example of Amazon Marketplace. Amazon became the largest online retailer in the world, not just by competing with others, but by cooperating and opening up a platform where other retailers could sell through them. Elaine, did you have a question? No? Okay. It was a gesture, just stretching yourself. Okay. Fine, no problem, whatever. Okay, so think about the list, think about it. I've given you some examples. I think the idea is clear. My purpose here is simply to say the number of ways in which an organization can energize itself is not limited. If I've given you 100 in the course, it could be 1,000. What I want you to see is the opportunities. There is no such thing as a dead end and a hopeless case. There are people who give up hope and who think they're at the dead end and can't see beyond it. It's a question of perception. It's a question of attitude. There are people who give up. There's never that there's a situation where there's nothing we can do. It's my experience. Okay, so this part finishes the course in terms of presentation of material. From the society, down to the individual, down to the act, from the objective dimensions of the act to the subjective dimensions. If you have any questions on anything that we discussed today or before I want to start the review, before we go to the review, if there's anything on your mind, please raise it. Great. Okay. I'll take your silence for that everything's crystal clear and hope that that's the case. Okay. Now let's go. We're going to start the review. I'd like to start with 3 conclusions that I've come to after studying businesses for many decades. And I've said this over and over again to audiences of CEOs in a challenging manner, intentionally in a provocative manner, to say that rapid and sustained growth is possible for any company that really wants it. It's a pretty outrageous statement to make, I told you earlier when we were talking about the Rayon Tire Cord Company, this is how I got in trouble with the head of the Indian Federated Indian Chamber of Commerce, who was running a company that he was very sure was on its way out of business. And when I made this statement, we were challenged and we showed him that he didn't have to run out of business. In fact, he's still in business 20 years after that. Actually, now 30 years after that. I've lost track of the time. But I emphasize here, the thing that determines whether it's possible or not is how much you really want it. Somebody quoted from the Gita, the famous line that you can become what you believe you can become. That's the subjective dimension. Here's the subjective dimension in this principle. I said, I know any company would like to grow rapidly and profitably, but liking to do it doesn't mean you really want it. You really must want it and be willing to do what it takes. It's intended as a provocative statement, and it's intended to emphasize the fact that the potential is there. It's inherent in organization. It's an inherent capacity of organization to keep growing. The second conclusion is that growth is a process that can be learned. Well, what do we mean by that? What I mean to say, it's not a question of luck. It's not a question of being in the right place at the right time. It's not a question of being a genius or a unique individual. Luck is good, helpful, good timing is good, and being a genius can come in handy also. But that's not the process. What I'm talking about is not just short-term success. I mean sustained success. Sustained success over time is the result of a process. And all we've been trying to talk about in this course is that process and the elements of this process so that it can be looked at in different ways. And the third conclusion is it's the same process for poor performers and industry leaders. I would add here, it's the same process of growth for a society, for a company, for an individual, or for an act of accomplishment. The process goes at the macro level and the micro level. So this is the overall theme of the course, which I've been trying to provide. We've been trying to present evidence and arguments to support it. And now in the rest of this, we're going to look at what that process is. I'm going to try to summarize the process in ways I hope will sound familiar to you and you won't think I'm starting a new subject on the last afternoon of the course. And before doing that, and this is, you can take this as figurative rather than mathematical, but I think there's a truth in it. I've tried to capsulate this process in a formula of sustained corporate success. That's the product of the 5 engines that we've been talking about of a business, the energy conversion process in the business, and the values that the business applies and the degree to which it implies them. And somewhat arbitrarily, I've assigned exponents for each of them, saying because there are 5 engines, I've given it to the power of 5 because the energy conversion has 4 stages to it, and values because there are 3 types of values, physical, mental, and social. But there are 27 values or 100 values. These numbers are only to say the multiplier potential is far, far greater than just simply putting these things together. It's simply, I'm not asking you to memorize a formula. I'm just trying to say the essence of the results of this growth process depend on all of these 3. They're not independent of each other. They're very much interrelated with each other. But if you manage these 3 together, there's always potential for growth and higher growth, even if you're already number 1 in your industry or number 1 in the world, the rules are the same. This is the thesis behind it. Okay, principles of organization. This is a theory, an organization rather a course on theory of organization. A theory has to have principles, and I've been trying to present principles, so let's just look at them. And maybe the first one is one you'll say, you never told us about the first. Well, the first one is okay. I hope you'll recognize the principles we're talking about are true of organization at 4 levels. They're true for the society as a whole. They're true for a company, which is a part and child of the society. They're true for an individual in whatever work the individual does. And they're also true at the level of an act. They're true for every act. So what we've talked about, energy or values, any of the things we've talked about, they're true at all the 4 levels. And that's why it makes a coherent theory. It has an objective dimension and a subjective dimension at all of the 4 levels. It's an integrated theory. And each of these 4 levels, and here's the key point, is related to the other 3. Every individual is acting, every company acts, the society is filled with actions all the time. The companies draw on the capabilities of the society draws on the capabilities and activities of the company, and both of them draw on the actions of individuals. The individuals draw on the social resources, the company resources. It's all interacting. I don't have a diagram that can describe it more integrated fashion. They're not 4 independent things. They're 4 very closely interdependent, integrated levels of reality. We all exist as individuals within organizations, within society, and we express ourselves through actions. So if we understand this for a company, we also understand it for ourselves. We also understand for any type of action, whether it's to make money or be in business or to be successful in our partnerships and relationships around. So the theory is of the whole, not just theory. That's why I didn't call it the theory of business organization. This is the theory of organization as a whole, but it applies to all these levels. Now this one is maybe the only one I haven't stated clearly in words before. It's an essential formula that's expressed in everything we've been saying, but I wanted to show you in a little different way to show you the interaction between everything we've been saying. And the principle says that all results, all progress, all growth, all performance depends on 2 things: consciousness and organization. Now, these words are general words that don't explain very much, so I want to take a look at what we mean by that. By consciousness, I mean the way in which we know reality and the decisions we make. And that was the theme we were talking about yesterday. And by organization, I mean the way we act. So let's look at these. I'm not going to talk about anything that we haven't already talked about. I'm just organizing it and presenting it in a little different perspective now. Consciousness means our awareness of all aspects of the world and society in which we live. Richard Sears was aware of a rural potential. Julius Rosenwald was aware of the fear and suspicion of the customer. Marriott was aware of the need and the opportunities for drive-in restaurants because of the automotive revolution. Jobs was aware of the anxiety about the computer and the possibilities for building a digital music company. Awareness is a critical dimension. Understanding, it's not enough we should be aware, we should understand the current realities and what's happening and how they're changing over time. Have it an evolutionary perspective of it. The Scotland Yard was aware about a lot of things in Silver Blaze, but they didn't really understand what they were aware of. They knew there was a receipt for the dress, the tailor's receipt for the dress, but they didn't understand the significance of it. It's not enough we know the facts and observe. We have to have an understanding of the significance of what we know, what we see. And insight into the relationship insight to the relationship between what we observe and what's going on around us. Insight into the significance of what we know for the world in which we live. And I asked you to discuss Silver Blaze, because what Sherlock Holmes didn't just have awareness and understanding, he had insight into how the whole thing comes together, how the whole reality that was presented as a lot of separate, unrelated facts, he had the insight into how it's all connected. And though we're giving a few examples over and over again, all great achievers have some insight into what others have missed. I keep giving the example of Jobs just because he's one of the best known. Steve Bezos in doing Amazon, or Elon Musk in the revolution he's pioneering in the electric vehicles. But you can go to any age, to Marriott in building his organization. These are the elements of consciousness that determine what will be accomplished. But awareness, understanding, and insight are not enough. They only release the energy. They create an awareness of the opportunity, and they release the energy. But it all depends on how you act. And the way we act depends on our capacity to organize our energies and channel them effectively in a coordinated way for action. So this is the second half of the formula. Our consciousness matters, and our capacity for organization and action matters. Oh, and I forgot here on the decision, on the consciousness side, the last point, of course, is the decisions we make. And this we discussed also last time, taking into account not only the objective facts, but subjectively, our attitudes, our capacities, our understanding, our aspirations. If you've got these, you've got the consciousness. And the organization can be described in many different ways. This is just a summary. I'm not saying anything new here. I'm just kind of trying to put it together. First thing we've talked about is, and we'll look at it again, that an organization has objective and subjective components or elements to it, and those exist at all levels, whether we're talking about the society, the company, the individual, or the act. Already I'm repeating myself, just showed you that I'm repeating what in a different way, what you already know. It depends on how we develop the 5 potential resources that are there. Now I'm talking in a business, but they're there in society, they're there in every field. How we meet the needs of the society, how we use the know-how, the knowledge, and the technology, how we are able to mobilize the capacities of people, how we're able to manage the assets, the capital, the finance, the resources that are available, and how we organize it. Those are the 5 engines which we spent a lot of time on. How we use the energy that's available and how we raise that energy and channel it and convert it into results. This is what I mean by organization, not just structure, not just systems, not just standards and procedures. And finally, how we systematically implement values in the act, in the work of our work as an individual, in an organization, in the society. So you can take this if you want. It's abstract. If it doesn't help you, you can forget it. But if you want to have a roadmap of the whole theory really fits in here. Everything is falling within on the subjective side of consciousness and the objective side of organization. And I'm going to go for another 5 minutes, and then we'll take our last break. So this is pure review now. Everything you see after this should be pure, almost pure review. So the objective elements of the organization, it's what we started with. If you remember the first day, we talked about the capacity of an organization to grow for efficiency, for multiplication, and self-multiplication. And we looked at different organizations and how they do it. And the second day we said, what are the factors that enable companies to be efficient, to multiply and self-multiply their results. And we said there are objective elements and there are subjective elements. And the objective elements for an organization, I called it the structure or the anatomy. I like to think of it that way as an analogy, how we divide we specialize at different levels of authority. We specialize in terms of different tasks. This determines down to the individual jobs. And the physiology or function, the way we all relate to one another through plans and strategies and systems and activities and rules and policies, procedures and standards. And this is what we mean by the objective elements of the organization. We showed you a slide with these elements on it on the second lecture. And then the subjective elements, which we've been talking about a lot. Physical elements, like physical energy, like our skills of all different types, like our attitudes of patience and endurance. Emotional elements, our enthusiasm, commitment, determination, our attitudes, our emotions, our social skills, they're all subjective. Mental elements like values, ideas, knowledge, aspirations. Mental skills, know-how, opinions, beliefs, information, facts, data, capacity for leadership. We've discussed all of this. I wanted to bring it back in. We're talking, I'm going back for a minute now. The process of growth involves our consciousness and our organization. And that organization has its objective dimensions to it, and it has subjective dimensions, which really express the consciousness with which the organization acts. They're not separate things, they're not separable things. This is the outer and this is the inner. One is outer and one is inner. I just want you to keep thinking of the whole. Any question up to this point? Clear, Sophia. All of it you know, heard before. Good. Good. Anybody? Anything that doesn't sound familiar? Anything you doubt where it fits in? Enough, right? Okay. Simple. Simple, I hope to understand. I'm not trying to make it complex. What I want you to have is the capacity to take these elements and apply them in any situation in your work or in your life and see. Everybody may say it's a hopeless case, but Gary says there's got to be opportunity here. If I apply what I know, I should be able to see the opportunity which other people don't see. For me, for you, for your life, for your work, for the organization, for the society as well. Okay. One more break, 10 more minutes, and then the last, you'll have to listen to me. After this, it's all I'm going to listen to you after. Okay.
Okay.
10 minutes.
See you.
Okay.
And I don't think you're going to see anything that you haven't seen before. I'm doing this for just comprehensiveness and to remind you. So we talked about, first we said that the society has these 5 resources, and that a company grows by tuning in to those 5 resources and converting them into engines for growth. The needs of the society and the aspirations of the market, people are obvious, the skills, knowledge, capacities of the people, the know-how, the knowledge that's there in the society, the organizational capabilities of the society, and of course, the resources, all types of resources, capital, financial resources, human resources, natural resources, man-made resources, infrastructure, and so forth. And how well can a company adapt and draw on these resources to build up its own internal capabilities? And we emphasized that not only are these are not 5 independent things, these are 5 closely interlocked, interdependent resources or engines. That's why the star shows them. They're not separate things. They're all related to each other. And what's ultimately important is the balance between them. The maximum growth comes when companies develop all of them in a balanced manner, so you get the maximum results from all of them. We spent a whole day on it. I hope this is just a reminder. And if there's any question, you're welcome to ask. So this was the first part of the formula that I was showing last time. The second one was energy. That the process of growth is a process of converting energy into results. And it depends on how much energy we can release. It depends on how effectively we can channel and direct that energy. It depends on how we can organize that energy and how we can channel it through the knowledge, attitudes, and skills of people and express that energy in work. And we use the analogy of the river, the natural river full of kinetic energy, and how the hydroelectric power plant channels that energy, directs it through the sluice gates, transforms it using the transformers into a form of energy that's utilizable, distributes it through the distribution systems to the point where it can be used to light lamps or run computers or the smallest thing that we do with it everywhere. And this is also a process of energy conversion, transmission, and transformation into results, into performance results. And the third we talked about was value implementation. How values, every type of value, physical, organizational, social, psychological values, is a way to elevate the power of an act, to raise the performance of an act, the quality of an act, the effectiveness of an act. And any act, most acts involve many of these values. And the potential is there to raise any act and energize it by implementing one or more of these values. And you can't exhaust the potential. And I said that value implementation is not a question of just talking about things, it's a question about implementing them. And I gave a simple process for value implementation, which we discussed. The implementation means the company is really committed, company or individual is really committed to the values, that we've defined standards so that we know what we mean by the value and we know what we mean by doing well on it. FedEx says they mean on-time delivery means we should be 100% on time. Sears meant customer satisfaction means if you're not satisfied, money back. It's defined in a clear way that we can understand. And then we've got to be sure that people know their responsibility. Who's responsible for implementing the value? We gave the example of DuPont and how even the chairman of the board has a responsibility. He's the chief safety officer in this multinational corporation. And people at all levels, at every department, in every division, in every plant, every supervisor has responsibilities for implementing the value. And then there are the systems needed to monitor performance and implement, without which value implementation is not possible. And then, of course, the skills, all different types of skills at different levels. So these three, balancing and integrating the 5 engines, the energy conversion process, and the value implementation process, and they're really not 3 separate things at all. They're 3 separate ways of looking at the integrality of a living organization. Because each of these engines, we have to energize it through the same process. We have to implement values in it. So it's just different ways of looking at something which is inseparable. It's one entity. The organization, the living organization, is a single integrated whole. We look at it from different perspectives to identify the opportunities to do it better. And then I wanted to end my summary, because I think I've covered the main principles here in just a few slides. But I wanted to end it with a summary. Again, it's a summary of the principles to energize the organization. It'll be somewhat repetitive, but giving you 10 all in one slide, just for ease of use. First is generate and maintain very high levels, overflowing levels of energy and enthusiasm. It's a key factor. I've mentioned it's the first thing I look for in any company to assess its performance, not the financials. If you've got the energy and enthusiasm, then there's a lot of work to be done. Doesn't mean you're going to have high profitability, but you've got the raw material you need. If you don't have it, the first thing you have to do is figure out how to release it, figure out how to generate it. And that can be challenging when it's not there, and find out why it's not there. Energy is the natural propensity of living things, living organisms, including us people. Society is full of energy. If our organization is not full of energy, why not? Are we cut off from the society? Are we out of tune with it? Are we cut off from our people? Have we demotivated them? Have we put a bureaucratic organization in place that smothers their initiative? What is it? And how do we break this out? This is the first objective, as far as I'm concerned, for any organization, not cash flow, but energy flow. Secondly, and this we spent a lot of time on the first couple of lectures, tuning in to social opportunities, not just to get market share, because market is only a small part of the society, but how to link ourselves and relate to the emerging opportunities in the society. And every one of the companies that we've talked about and talked to also are companies that did that, and did that extraordinarily well. They saw what was untapped. They weren't just looking for part of the competitive market share. They were talking about creating new markets, as Apple has done so impressively over the decades. And then not just to tune in to social opportunities, but to anticipate them, to create new ways to meet those needs. And that's really what Jobs did when he created the iPod, or he really created a smartphone that was a multifaceted hand computer that could do so many things, thousands of things that we weren't doing on computers up until now, and it keeps expanding. And many other examples are there. And then, how do we internalize the available social resources? Society is filled with resources. How do we find a way to tap those resources, whether it's knowledge or technology or organization or people or capital of different types, and make it useful and productive in our business? That's what a company is. In other words, I've been trying to emphasize all along that the boundary of a company is a thin, porous boundary, just like our skin is. It's not a wall. It's not that there's an inside and outside. It's a porous flow in which things are coming in all the time. Ideas are coming in, information, opportunities, and things are going out all the time, hopefully, to the society. And the more we think of it as this organism breathing in a wider environment and thriving because of the wider environment, the more we'll be aware of what the potentials are, both to go out to the society as well as to draw on what the society possesses. And then what I just spoke a few minutes ago, balancing the 5 engines, I would also say integrating the 5 engines so that, and I think we may have told a few stories. I have hundreds of war stories about companies that had wonderful technology and even good marketing, but they never integrated with each other. Or one of them dictated to the other. That was Chrysler's problem. They had advanced technology, but it wasn't in tune with what the market wanted. And that's a common syndrome with engineering-led companies. And then releasing, directing the corporate energy. As I said, it's a summary. Implementing values to the level of perfection, and you can never implement any value to the level of perfection, simply because the more you do, the more the company grows, and the more the need, the more the challenge to maintain that perfection as it grows and expands. And that's true of organization too. No company can have a perfect organization, because the more it fine-tunes the organization, the more it grows, and the greater the challenge for the organization to grow with it. So these are endless goals. And this is a principle I don't think I have spoken. It's not a new principle, but it's a fact. And it's a very important fact, that one of the most powerful ways to attract the market, to make the market come to us, is to make the organization perfect. Perfectly responsive, perfectly smooth and easy. And maybe the best example, or one of the, there are many good examples, but one of the best examples of this is what Amazon has done. Amazon's not really going out to the customer. I mean, they advertise and stuff. Amazon, we don't deal with the people. For all the times that we deal with companies like Amazon, very little, very seldom are we actually in touch with individuals there. We don't even go there. What they've tried to create is an organization that's as perfect as possible, to give us what we want, to give us the information we want, to make it easy for us to get what we want, so that we are interacting with that organization in a seamless way. And of course, there'll always be imperfections, but the last 25 years, this organization has been continuously fine-tuning itself, refining itself, getting better and better and better at making things easy for us. So that's what I mean by an organization that involuntarily attracts the market. Even if you don't go out trying to sell something, the market comes to you because it's so easy to use it. It's a very powerful strategy, whether you're an online retailer or a bank or in any industry, even if you don't have an online presence. The principle is true. The more streamlined and transparent the organization, the more people want to deal with us. And then this goes for everybody. The more a company can develop the potentials of every individual, it's not just the market, it's not just our payroll, it's not just our technology, it's not just our systems. Every individual is a microcosm. Every individual has unique capacities. In big organizations, when we're fit into standardized roles, where we have different assignments and everything, we miss out on a lot of the unique capacities of the individuals who are there. We have no time to even know them and what they can do. But on a really all-star team, in a professional team, you have standard positions and everything. But the more successful the team is, the more they know the capacities of each individual, and it's not the job description that defines things perfectly. It's the way people work together to support each other, to interchangeably with each other, without the need for these very rigidly defined groups. I have a research team of about 10 people who work with me here, or here, they're all over the world, but they're working on a day-to-day basis. And to a very large extent, I leave it to them to decide who does what, because they know better than I do at any one moment who's the best for this, or who's the most interested in it, or who's got the least pressure of time for other things. And I find, and I get praise for my informal organization all over the world from the people who deal with them, that they're just amazed at the quality of service and motivation that the team has, because everybody is being given an opportunity to do things they're interested in, or to bring out their capacities, it's not so much imposed as it's coordinated by the members of the group. And you can talk to Vani and Janani later, and they can tell you that my description's totally fabricated, and then I don't really know the other side of the story. But this is the way it looks to me, and I'm very proud of the team I have. Okay, and finally, every single act has that potential to be energized. So I think you get my message. The potential's not limited theoretically. I've seen that it need not be limited practically. And if you take any company that's grown continuously over long periods of time, these 10 principles do a pretty good job. Instead of saying, where's the genius who made this company successful, or where is the luck, they happen to be in the right place at the right time. These things are genius and luck, as far as I'm concerned, for an organization. So I have done enough talking, not only for today, but for this course. I have very much enjoyed talking with you and working with you. You're a bright, responsive group. Now we come to the last stages, the final exam, but if you have any questions on anything that we've discussed today or in the last 9 days that you'd like further elaboration on, please ask.
You've explained everything so clearly that it's hard to ask anything.
Gary, believe me, now we definitely know what the organization is.
Good. And I hope you find that this knowledge is of great practical value to you.
Sure.
In what you do. That's my.
Not in only corporate lives, but also in personal lives.
That'll be very gratifying. I hope so. Personally, for me, all that I speak is what I try to live also, and I find the borderline between the professional and the personal is very, very thin because the professional life becomes more and more fulfilling, and the personal life becomes also more fulfilling when we have the right understanding and we haven't divided our lives arbitrarily into two different independent units.
Life-work balance.
Balance and
it would be very interesting to ask the same question. What is organization on the first lecture and last lecture? I'm sure the answers would be very different from each other.
This is a good answer.
For me, it completely changed the idea of organization. It was quite interesting.
I'm very happy to hear it, Anna. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, Srijit, why don't we talk about the final and see if we clarify our intentions.
So I think, Janani or Vani is going ahead with that actually examination. I can definitely give some suggestions.
No, whoever was planning to talk.
About the procedure, the questions will be mailed tomorrow on Sunday. And then you will have to write the answers and mail them by Thursday night, so that we will have time to evaluate. That would be the written test. And on August 1st, the next Saturday, we will have an oral discussion, an one-on-one discussion with each student.
So we'll be meeting each of you for 15 to 20 minutes based on the answers you've given to the questions. Obviously, it's not an open book exam, it's an open world exam because you're free to answers wherever you want. But I hope they'll come from inside because I think the answers are inside if you simply apply your minds to these things. We're not looking for information. We're looking for your capacity to apply the principles. But you can go anywhere that works for you. And then we'll sit for about 20 minutes each, 15, 20 minutes each, discuss what you've written and maybe some other things just to see how far this really has become real or settled in. and is a useful tool for you. So we said by tomorrow, Bonnie, we'll be sending out the questions.
Yes, tomorrow morning we'll send the questions, and they will have to send the answers by Thursday, 30th night.
Yeah, and we really appreciate that because we need some time to review before we meet with you on Saturday. Any questions about it?
Will it be via Google Drive or just the ordinary Word file, the exam assignment?
Does it matter, Zizi?
No, just a question. Oh.
The advantage of the Google is that we can each share the same. We can each, after you finished it, we can each share it without passing around so many examinations.
Yeah, it automatically saves. Okay.
That's the
And also one more question. So we will switch to the lecture next Saturday, the same time, right?
Same.
It's 1 p.m. Tbilisi time, right?
2 hours, right? 2 hours for the exam. And what we haven't thought about yet, we will tell you by tomorrow. We're meeting again tonight to find, we wanted to wait till after this session to finalize, but what we will do during that 2 hours, if we're meeting each of you for 15 minutes, we'll just think it through one further and send you a note so you know what to expect. But we'll be finished with the 2 hours.
Okay, great.
Great.
Okay.
It's good
Me
that
too. Thank you, and yeah, talk to you next Saturday. So it's not final goodbye still.
Oh, no, not final.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Okay. Thank you, Gary.
You want to?
Bye.
Bye.
Bye now.
Thank you very much.